Hey everyone, this is Dr. Sho, the Japanese behaviorist. I love when the anime character awakens the superpower and goes berserk. Even better, when that superpower is actually coming from the monster that's hidden inside the character's body. Goku, Naruto, Kenshin, Eren, Ashitaka, Shinichi. Wait a minute. There are so many of them. What's going on? Japanese anime and manga has a beloved character setting. A monster hides within the protagonist's body and sometimes takes over the control and goes berserk, usually benefiting the protagonist by fending off the enemies but with some collateral damage. The protagonist struggles to control this monster, but eventually they make peace and become an unbeatable superpower. You can see this in so many animes. Goku from Dragon Ball turns into a giant ape, but then he controls it and becomes Super Saiyan 4. Naruto has the nine-tailed fox inside him, which eventually becomes his best friend. Eren is a titan, Kenshin is a manslayer, and Shinichi has an alien inside. And on and on. But why do the Japanese love this setup so much? Here I propose two different interpretations based on psychology, psychoanalysis and behavior analysis, and you can tell me which one is more convincing to you. Psychoanalysis is founded by Freud and interested in unconscious motivations. The psychoanalytic interpretation says that the Japanese love this setup so much because it resonates with Japan's collective trauma. By watching these animes, the Japanese are reconciling the past trauma in a safe way. What kind of trauma do the Japanese have as a group? World War II. Japan got so strong with a modernized European-style military and became a superpower in Asia. But because of that, it was severely punished by the nuclear weapon. The Japanese were traumatized by this experience. In Princess Mononoke, this trauma is most clear. The gunshot turns a local Japanese god into a demon, and Prince Ashitaka kills it. By killing it, the Prince Ashitaka gains a supernatural power but also a curse. The gunshot represents Western power, which then kills the traditional Japanese culture but then gives a tremendous power to the Japanese with a curse. The monster is usually strong, destructive, inhumane, and uncontrollable. It represents Japan's military power. Even after World War II, Japan returned as an economic superpower. The Japanese unconsciously feel guilty about it and they are afraid of another catastrophic consequence. By watching these animes where the protagonists go berserk, struggle to control the monsters and finally reconcile with them over and over again, the Japanese are releasing their unconscious stress. Based on the psychoanalytic interpretation, this is why the Japanese love this setup so much. Behavior analysis, on the other hand, points to a completely different aspect of this narrative. Behavior analysis is founded by B.F. Skinner and interested in how behavior develops over time as a result of interaction with an environment. Behavior analytic interpretation says, no, it has nothing to do with trauma. If it were all about the trauma, then the only people who would love these animes are the ones who have the same kind of trauma as the Japanese. But in reality, so many people from different countries love these animes. Behavior analytic interpretation says that some Japanese hit the jackpot. Somebody discovered this plot by accident and others copied and shaped and perfected it over time. It was just a coincidence that it happened in Japan and not in other countries. You can see this development over time. In the beginning, there were stories about a werewolf and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There are also some ghost stories where a ghost possesses a human. And these early stories always ended in tragedy. Dragon Ball is still this type of a story. Goku has an aspect of a werewolf. He looks at the full moon and he transforms into a giant ape. But this setup is quickly forgotten in the series, and Goku is never tormented by the fact that he killed his grandpa this way. In fact, nobody told him about it when they discovered it. And I still think he doesn't know even today. Anyway, Dragon Ball is still halfway to a perfect form. One of the first Japanese mangas to hit the jackpot was probably Ushio and Tora in the 90s. It's a mixture of a Japanese ghost story and a werewolf story. The monster possesses the boy, they fight against each other, but they also fight together to defeat a common enemy. In the end, they develop a very strong friendship. Maybe it's one of the first stories of this kind to have a happy relationship between the protagonist and the monster. And Ushio and Tora was a hit. And since then, there are so many similar setups showed up. And as it was copied and imitated so many times, the form itself gradually was shaped into perfection. And one of the perfect forms of this kind is probably Naruto. What was amazing about Naruto is that the monster possession setup became a social stigma, which introduced a psychological struggle in the story. And the power of this plot is rather universal. It is not just for the Japanese, but for everyone in the world. Recent Hollywood movies like Hulk in the Avengers and Venom have the exact same setup. And it works. Behavior analytic interpretation says that it might have been some Japanese who figured it out, but once it's there, it's for everyone. So, these are the psychoanalytic and behavior analytic interpretations of why the Japanese love this monster within setup so much. Which interpretation did you like? Or do you have another way to understand it? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video. ありがとうございました。